Jasmine had always been the kind of girl who kept her head down and minded her own business. She wasn't looking for trouble, and she definitely wasn't the type to cause drama. But sometimes trouble finds you anyway, no matter how hard you try to avoid it. It started small, really small. The kind of stuff that most people would tell you to just ignore. A whispered comment here, a snicker there. Someone would bump into her in the hallway and mutter something under their breath. At first she thought maybe she was imagining it. Maybe she was being too sensitive. That's what her mom always said when she complained about things. Don't let every little thing bother you, baby. You're stronger than that. So she tried to be strong. She tried to brush it off. But as the weeks turned into months, it got harder and harder to pretend everything was fine. Riverside High wasn't like her old school. Back in the city, she'd been surrounded by kids who looked like her, who understood her, who shared her experiences. Here in the suburbs, things were different. Very different. She could count on one hand how many other black students were in her grade, and most days she felt like everyone was staring at her, judging her, waiting for her to mess up somehow. The worst part was Tyler and his crew. They seemed to have made it their personal mission to make her life miserable. Tyler was the kind of guy who thought he owned the school. Captain of the baseball team, popular with the teachers, always cracking jokes in class. Everyone loved him. Well, almost everyone. To Jasmine, he was just a bully hiding behind a charming smile. It started with comments about her hair, then her clothes, then her voice, the way she talked, the music she listened to. Nothing was off limits. His friends would laugh on cue like they were his personal audience. And the teachers? They never seemed to notice, or maybe they just didn't want to get involved. Jasmine tried talking to her guidance counselor once, about 2 months in. Mrs. Patterson had listened with a sympathetic look on her face, nodding along as Jasmine explained what was happening. But at the end of the conversation, all she said was, "High school can be tough, sweetie. Kids can be mean sometimes. Just try to rise above it and focus on your studies. They'll get bored eventually and move on to something else. Rise above it." That phrase made Jasmine want to scream. How was she supposed to rise above it when she dreaded walking through the hallways? When she spent her lunch periods hiding in the library because the cafeteria felt like walking into enemy territory? When she went home every day feeling exhausted from pretending everything was okay? Her parents noticed something was wrong, of course. They weren't blind. But when they asked, she'd just say school was fine, just different from what she was used to. She didn't want to worry them. Her dad had gotten a great job opportunity out here, and they'd moved the whole family for it. She didn't want to be the reason they regretted the decision. So she kept quiet. And she kept documenting. That's the thing nobody knew about Jasmine. She was smart. Really smart. And she had a plan. About a month into the bullying, she'd started keeping track of everything. Every incident, every comment, every time someone made her feel small. She wrote it down in a journal at first, then realized that wasn't enough. She needed proof that people couldn't deny or dismiss. She started recording audio on her phone whenever she walked alone in the hallways. She took screenshots of the nasty messages that showed up in her social media comments. She noted dates, times, witnesses. She even figured out the best angles to keep her phone camera running without anyone noticing. Was it paranoid? Maybe. But it turned out to be the smartest thing she ever did. The day everything changed was a Tuesday. Jasmine remembered because Tuesdays were always the worst. She had tutoring after school for AP chemistry, which meant she'd be walking through mostly empty hallways around 5 o'clock when everyone else had gone home. Tyler and his friends knew this. They'd figured out her schedule. She'd stayed late in the chemistry lab, going over molecular structures with Mr. Chen. He was one of the few teachers who actually seemed to care about his students. When the session ended, she thanked him and headed out, her backpack heavy with textbooks. The hallway was quiet. Too quiet. Her footsteps echoed against the lockers as she walked, and she felt that familiar knot forming in her stomach. Something felt off. She was right. Tyler stepped out from around the corner, blocking her path. His two closest friends, Brandon and Kyle, were right behind him. They had that look on their faces, that mixture of amusement and cruelty that she'd come to recognize. "Well, well, well," Tyler said, his voice dripping with fake friendliness. "Look who we have here." Jasmine's heart started pounding, but she kept her face neutral. "I need to get past," she said calmly. "Oh, you need to get past," Tyler repeated, mocking her tone. "Did you guys hear that? She needs to get past." Brandon and Kyle laughed right on schedule. Jasmine tried to step around them, but they moved to block her. This wasn't new. They'd cornered her before, thrown insults, tried to intimidate her. She'd always managed to get away or wait them out. But today felt different. There was an edge to Tyler's voice, something more aggressive than usual. That's when he reached into his gym bag. Time seemed to slow down as he pulled out a baseball bat. Jasmine's breath caught in her throat. This was beyond verbal harassment. This was something else entirely. "You know what your problem is?" Tyler said, holding the bat loosely in his hands. "You think you're better than everyone else, walking around here with your attitude like you own the place." "I never said that," Jasmine managed to say, her voice steadier than she felt. "I just want to go to school and be left alone." "Left alone?" Tyler laughed, but there was no humor in it. He lifted the bat, resting it on his shoulder. "See, that's the thing. You don't get to just show up here and act like you belong." He swung the bat through the air, not quite at her, but close enough that she felt the whoosh of air. She flinched, taking a step back. Brandon and Kyle were grinning, eating this up like it was the best entertainment they'd had all week. Tyler swung again, closer this time. "What's wrong, scared?" Everything in Jasmine wanted to run. Every instinct screamed at her to get out of there, to find an adult, to do anything except stand there. But something else kicked in, something that had been building over 3 months of harassment. 3 months of being made to feel like she didn't matter, like she was less than everyone else. She wasn't going to run anymore. Her hand slipped into her jacket pocket, finding her phone. She'd turned on the audio recording before she even left the chemistry lab, a habit she'd developed over the past few weeks. But now she needed more. With movements she hoped looked casual, she pulled out her phone, angling it so the camera was facing them. Tyler was so caught up in his performance, so confident in his power over her, that he didn't even notice. He swung the bat one more time, laughing as she stood her ground. "You really think you're tough, don't you?" he said. Jasmine looked directly at him, then at the camera, then back at him. Her voice when she spoke was clear and calm. "I think you should put the bat down now." Tyler's smile widened. "Or what?" "Or nothing," she said. "Just thought you'd want to know that everything you just did is on video. And it's already uploaded to the cloud." The smile disappeared from Tyler's face. Brandon and Kyle exchanged nervous glances. For the first time since this whole thing started, Jasmine saw something in their eyes that she recognized. Fear. She didn't wait for them to respond. She walked forward, and this time they stepped aside. Her legs felt like jelly and her hands were shaking, but she kept walking. She didn't run. She walked with her head up, her phone gripped tight in her hand. She walked straight past them, down the hallway, and directly to the principal's office. She didn't care that it was after hours. She didn't care that she might be interrupting something. This ended today. The principal's office was down 2 hallways and around a corner. Every step Jasmine took felt heavy, like her legs were made of concrete. Her heart was still racing from the confrontation, and she could feel adrenaline pumping through her whole body. Behind her, she heard Tyler and his friends scrambling, their voices raised in panic. She didn't look back. The administrative office was quiet when she pushed through the door. Mrs. Gibson, the secretary, looked up from her computer with surprise. Most students were long gone by this time of day. "Jasmine, what are you doing here so late?" Mrs. Gibson asked, her reading glasses perched on her nose. "I need to see Principal Henderson. Right now. It's an emergency." Something in Jasmine's voice must have convinced her, because Mrs. Gibson didn't ask questions. She picked up her phone and pressed a button. "Sir, there's a student here who needs to see you immediately. She says it's urgent." There was a pause, then Mrs. Gibson nodded. "Go ahead, honey. He'll see you." Jasmine walked to the principal's door and knocked. A voice from inside called, "Come in." Principal Henderson was a tall man with graying hair and glasses that always seemed to be sliding down his nose. He looked up from his desk with a confused expression as Jasmine entered. "Miss Carter? Is everything all right?" Where did she even start? Jasmine felt the weight of 3 months pressing down on her shoulders. But she wasn't that same girl who tried to talk to the guidance counselor anymore. She'd been preparing for this moment, even if she hadn't known exactly when it would come. "No, sir. Everything is not all right." She held up her phone. "I was just threatened with a baseball bat by Tyler Bennett and his friends in the West hallway. I have it on video." Principal Henderson's eyebrows shot up. He leaned forward in his chair. "That's a serious accusation." "Can I see the video?" Jasmine's hands were still shaking as she pulled up the file and handed him her phone. She watched his face as he played it, saw his expression change from skepticism to concern, to something that looked like alarm. The sound of Tyler's voice came through clearly, along with the whooshing sound of the bat cutting through the air. When the video ended, Principal Henderson was quiet for a long moment. Then he cleared his throat. "This is very disturbing. I'll need to talk to Tyler and the other students involved. Can you identify them?" "Brandon Chen and Kyle Rodriguez," Jasmine said immediately. "And sir, there's more." She took her phone back and opened the folder she'd been building for months. "This isn't the first incident. It's not even close. I have screenshots, audio recordings, and written documentation of everything that's happened since I started at this school in September." Principal Henderson held up a hand. "Wait, everything? What do you mean by everything?" Jasmine took a deep breath. This was it, the moment she'd been planning for. I mean, 3 months of constant harassment and bullying. Racist comments in the hallways. Messages sent through social media. Physical intimidation. And before you tell me these are just kids being kids, I also have records of the 3 times I tried to report this to teachers and was told to ignore it, or that I was being too sensitive. She pulled up file after file, showing him timestamps and dates. Screenshots of messages calling her slurs, telling her to go back where she came from, saying she didn't belong at Riverside High. Audio clips of students making comments about her hair, her skin, her way of speaking, and most damning of all, the notes she'd taken after speaking to Mrs. Patterson, Mr. Weaver, and Coach Thomas, each of whom had dismissed her concerns. Principal Henderson's face had gone pale. He removed his glasses and rubbed his eyes. "Miss Carter, why didn't you come to me with this sooner?" "Because I needed proof," Jasmine said simply. "I needed evidence that couldn't be explained away or dismissed. I needed to make sure that when I did speak up, people would have to listen." The principal was quiet, staring at the phone in his hands. Jasmine could see him processing, calculating, probably thinking about the legal implications of what she'd just shown him. "Good. Let him worry about that. I've already sent copies of everything to my parents," she continued. "They forwarded it to the school board, 3 local news stations, and a civil rights organization that deals with discrimination in schools. You have 24 hours to take action before my family goes public with this." Principal Henderson's head snapped up. "Now let's not be hasty. I understand you're upset, and you have every right to be, but going to the media will only make this more difficult for everyone involved." "More difficult for who?" Jasmine asked, and she heard the edge in her own voice. "For me, because it's already been pretty difficult, sir. For Tyler and his friends, because maybe they should face some consequences for their actions. Or more difficult for the school, because maybe this school should be held accountable for letting this happen." "That's not what I meant," Principal Henderson said quickly. He set her phone down on his desk carefully like it might explode. "Of course we want to address this situation. I'm just saying that if we work together, we can handle this internally and make sure everyone learns from this experience." Jasmine had heard enough variations of this speech to know where it was going. "Keep it quiet. Don't make waves. Protect the school's reputation. Protect Tyler's future. Protect everyone except her. With all due respect, sir, I'm done handling things quietly. I tried that for 3 months and nothing changed. In fact, it got worse. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to conduct a full investigation. You're going to interview Tyler, Brandon, and Kyle. You're going to review all the evidence I've provided, and you're going to take real action, not just a slap on the wrist and a reminder to be nice to each other." She stood up, picking her phone up from his desk. "If I don't see serious consequences by this time tomorrow, my parents are holding a press conference. They've already contacted a lawyer, by the way. I believe the terms they used were hostile educational environment and failure to protect a student from racial harassment." Principal Henderson stood up too, holding out his hands in a placating gesture. "Please sit back down. Let's talk about this. I promise you we take these allegations very seriously." "They're not allegations," Jasmine said firmly. "They're facts. Documented facts. And I'm not sitting down. I'm going home now. My parents will be expecting your call within the hour." She turned toward the door, but Principal Henderson's voice stopped her. "Jasmine, wait. I need you to understand something. If we proceed with this, there will be consequences for everyone involved. Tyler could face expulsion. His college prospects could be affected. These are serious outcomes for teenage mistakes." Jasmine turned back around slowly. You know what else has serious outcomes? Being threatened with a weapon at school. Living in fear every single day. Having your education disrupted because you're too busy trying to stay safe to focus on learning. Those are serious outcomes too, sir. But somehow I don't think you were worried about those consequences for the past 3 months. The look on Principal Henderson's face told her everything she needed to know. He hadn't been worried about her consequences. He'd probably barely thought about her at all. But now that there was video evidence, now that lawyers and news stations were involved, suddenly everyone was very concerned. I'll be calling the parents of all students involved, Principal Henderson said finally, and I'll be reaching out to your parents as well. We'll get to the bottom of this. Jasmine nodded. Good. That's all I wanted from the beginning. Someone to take this seriously. She left the office, walking past Mrs. Gibson, who was pretending not to have heard everything through the thin walls. The hallways were completely empty now, the janitors probably working on the other side of the building. Jasmine's footsteps echoed as she made her way to the exit. Her mom was waiting in the parking lot, her car running. Jasmine had texted her right after the incident just the words, "Need you, come now. I'm okay, but need to leave school." The moment Jasmine slid into the passenger seat, her mom took one look at her face and pulled her into a hug. That's when the tears finally came. All the fear she'd been pushing down, all the anger she'd been channeling into action, it all came flooding out at once. "Baby, what happened?" her mom asked, holding her tight. Between sobs, Jasmine told her everything. About Tyler and the bat, about the video, about the folder full of evidence she'd been collecting, about the meeting with Principal Henderson. Her mom listened without interrupting, her jaw getting tighter and tighter. When Jasmine finished, her mom pulled back and looked her in the eyes. "You've been dealing with this alone for 3 months? Why didn't you tell us?" "I didn't want you to worry," Jasmine said quietly. "And I didn't think anyone would believe me without proof." Her mom's eyes filled with tears. "Oh, sweetheart, we always would have believed you. Always. But I understand why you felt you needed that evidence. You're so much braver than you know." They sat in the parking lot for a few more minutes while Jasmine composed herself. Then her mom started the car, her expression determined. "All right. We're going home, we're calling your father, and we're calling the lawyer. If that principal thinks he can sweep this under the rug, he's got another thing coming." As they drove away from Riverside High, Jasmine looked back at the building. She'd spent 3 months feeling powerless within those walls, but today everything had changed. She'd stood up for herself. She'd refused to back down. And whatever happened next, she knew one thing for certain. She wasn't afraid anymore. That night, the Carter family sat around their dining room table for what felt like hours. Jasmine's dad had rushed home from work the moment her mom called him. He'd listened to everything with his lawyer voice on, the one he used when he was processing information and planning strategy. He was a corporate attorney, and while school discrimination cases weren't his specialty, he knew enough to understand how serious this was. "Let me make sure I understand," he said, looking at the evidence Jasmine had compiled on her laptop. "You've been documenting everything for 3 months. You have video, audio, screenshots, and written records, and you've already distributed copies to multiple parties." Jasmine nodded. "I wanted to make sure it couldn't disappear or get lost. I know how these things work sometimes." Her dad looked at her with an expression that was part pride, part heartbreak. "You shouldn't have had to become an investigator just to be safe at school. But I'm impressed by how thorough you were. This is solid evidence." Her mom was still angry, pacing back and forth in the kitchen. "I can't believe none of those teachers took her seriously. What is wrong with people?" "A lot of things," her dad said quietly. "But right now we need to focus on next steps. I've already called David Morrison. He specializes in education law and civil rights cases. He's reviewing the evidence tonight and will meet with us tomorrow morning." Jasmine's phone buzzed. Then again. And again. She looked down to see a flood of messages coming in. Word was spreading fast. The first few were from classmates she barely knew. "Is it true you got Tyler suspended? Did you really record him? Why are you trying to ruin his life?" Then there were others. "Thank you for speaking up. You're so brave. Can I talk to you about something that happened to me?" Her mom noticed her staring at her phone. "What is it?" "Everyone knows," Jasmine said. "The whole school probably knows by now." "Good," her dad said firmly. "Let them know. You have nothing to hide or be ashamed of." but Jasmine felt a knot forming in her stomach anyway. Tomorrow she'd have to face everyone at school, and she had no idea what that would be like. Sleep didn't come easily that night. Jasmine lay in bed replaying the confrontation in the hallway over and over. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Tyler's face, heard the sound of the bat cutting through the air. But she also remembered the fear in his eyes when she told him she'd recorded everything. That part felt good. The next morning, Jasmine's parents drove her to school together. They'd both taken the day off work. "We're coming in with you," her mom said. "We have a meeting with Principal Henderson at 8. The parking lot was buzzing with activity even though they'd arrived early. Students stood in clusters, talking in hushed voices. Jasmine felt eyes on her the moment she stepped out of the car. Some kids pointed. Others quickly looked away. In the principal's office, they found more than just Principal Henderson waiting. The superintendent, Dr. Patricia Cole, was there too, along with the school's legal counsel and the head of student affairs. This was bigger than Jasmine had realized. Dr. Cole stood to greet them, her expression serious. "Mr. and Mrs. Carter, Jasmine, thank you for coming in. I want you to know that we're treating this matter with the utmost seriousness." "I should hope so," Jasmine's dad said, his voice cool and professional. "My daughter was threatened with a weapon on school property, and according to her documentation, the harassment had been ongoing for months while staff members repeatedly dismissed her concerns." Dr. Cole nodded, her face grim. "We've begun a full investigation. Tyler Bennett, Brandon Chen, and Kyle Rodriguez have been suspended pending the outcome. We've also pulled their schedules and interviewed students who share classes with them to identify any other witnesses or victims." "Other victims?" Jasmine's mom asked sharply. "We have reason to believe this wasn't an isolated incident," Principal Henderson admitted. "Since word got out yesterday evening, several other students have come forward with complaints about Tyler and his friends. And some have reported feeling unsafe at this school for other reasons as well." Jasmine felt a strange mix of emotions. Vindication, yes, but also sadness that other kids had been suffering too, and anger that it had taken her recording a video for anyone to care. "We'd like Jasmine to participate in the investigation," Dr. Cole continued. "We'll need her to provide a formal statement and walk us through all the evidence she's compiled." "Absolutely not," Jasmine's dad said immediately. "My daughter has already provided everything you need. You have video evidence of yesterday's incident and comprehensive documentation of the harassment she endured. If you need anything clarified, you can submit questions in writing to our attorney, David Morrison. He'll be in touch later today." Dr. Cole exchanged a glance with the legal counsel, a thin man in a gray suit who'd been scribbling notes the entire time. "We understand your concerns, Mr. Carter. But to ensure a thorough investigation should have happened the first time my daughter reported being harassed," Jasmine's mom interrupted. "The first time, the second time, the third time. But it didn't. So forgive us if we're not interested in making this easier for you now." The room fell silent. Jasmine had never seen her parents like this before. They were usually calm, diplomatic people, but right now they were furious and they weren't hiding it. Principal Henderson cleared his throat. "I want to address the concerns about staff members dismissing Jasmine's reports. We take those allegations very seriously as well. The teachers mentioned in her documentation will be interviewed, and if we find that proper protocols weren't followed, there will be consequences." "What protocols?" Jasmine asked, speaking up for the first time. Everyone turned to look at her. "What are teachers supposed to do when a student reports bullying?" Principal Henderson looked uncomfortable. "Well, there's a formal reporting process. Teachers are required to document any complaints and forward them to administration. Then we investigate and take appropriate action. Mrs. Patterson told me to rise above it," Jasmine said. "Mr. Weaver said kids can be mean and that I should focus on my grades. Coach Thomas said I was being too sensitive. None of them documented anything or forwarded anything to anyone. I know because I asked them if they were going to make a report, and they all said it wasn't necessary." The legal counsel stopped writing and looked up. Principal Henderson and Dr. Cole exchanged another uncomfortable glance. "We'll be looking into that," Dr. Cole said firmly. "If proper procedures weren't followed, we need to understand why and ensure it doesn't happen again." Jasmine's dad leaned forward. "Here's what's going to happen. Jasmine will not be returning to classes until you can guarantee her safety. We're not talking about promises and good intentions. We're talking about concrete measures. What specific steps are you taking to ensure my daughter won't face retaliation from Tyler's friends, or from students who think she's caused trouble, or from anyone else who might decide to target her? The room erupted in discussion. The school officials talked about security measures, schedule changes, possibly having a staff member escort Jasmine between classes. Her parents pushed back, pointing out that none of those things addressed the underlying problem, the culture that had allowed this to happen in the first place. Finally, Dr. Cole held up her hand. "Give us 48 hours. We need time to complete the initial phase of our investigation and implement proper safeguards. Jasmine, you can learn from home for the rest of this week. We'll provide assignments and make sure you don't fall behind." It wasn't perfect, but it was something. Jasmine's parents agreed, with the understanding that they'd be monitoring the situation closely and that their lawyer would be reviewing any action the school took. As they left the administration building, Jasmine felt exhausted. It was only 9 in the morning and she already felt like she'd lived a whole day. "You okay, sweetheart?" her mom asked, putting an arm around her shoulders. Jasmine nodded, though she wasn't sure that was true. "What happens now?" "Now we wait," her dad said, "and we make sure they follow through on their promises." But Jasmine didn't have to wait long to see the impact of what she'd started.
By lunchtime, her social media was flooded with messages.
Some were supportive. Others were vicious. But the ones that stuck with her were from other students who were sharing their own stories. A girl named Diana messaged her privately. "I never told anyone this, but Tyler and his friends used to make fun of my accent. I'm from Mexico and they'd mock the way I pronounce certain words. It made me feel so small. Thank you for standing up. I wish I'd been brave enough to do it too." Another student, Kevin, sent her a long message about being excluded from study groups and social events, about hearing people make comments about Asian students being robots who only cared about grades. "I thought I just had to deal with it until graduation," he wrote. "I didn't know we could actually do something about it." By the end of the day, Jasmine had received messages from 12 different students. 12 kids who'd been dealing with their own versions of harassment and discrimination. Some of it was racial. Some of it was about religion or sexual orientation or disability, or just being different in some way that made them a target. She showed the messages to her parents that evening. Her mom read through them with tears in her eyes. "All these kids," she whispered. "All these kids were suffering and nobody did anything." "We're doing something now," Jasmine said quietly. And she meant it. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about every student who'd ever felt unsafe, unheard, or unwelcome at Riverside High. That night, Jasmine drafted a message to everyone who'd reached out to her. She told them about the investigation, about how the school was being forced to take this seriously. She encouraged them to come forward too, to add their voices to hers. "We're stronger together," she wrote. "They can ignore one person. They can't ignore all of us." She hit send and watched as the responses started pouring in. Some students were scared. Some weren't ready to speak up, but others were. By the next morning, 10 more students had contacted Principal Henderson with formal complaints. The trickle had become a flood, and Riverside High had no choice but to pay attention. By Thursday morning, Riverside High was in full crisis mode. The local news had picked up the story, running a segment about bullying and discrimination in suburban schools. They didn't use Jasmine's name since she was a minor, but everyone knew who they were talking about. The reporter stood outside the school interviewing parents who were split right down the middle. Some parents were outraged on Jasmine's behalf. "Our children should feel safe at school," one mother said into the camera. "If students are being threatened and harassed, that's unacceptable." But others defended Tyler. "These are good kids who made a mistake," a father argued. "One incident shouldn't ruin a young man's entire future. This girl is being vindictive." Jasmine watched the news segment from her living room, feeling sick. One incident? They were calling 3 months of targeted harassment and a physical threat one incident? Her phone rang. It was Diana, the girl who'd messaged her about being mocked for her accent. "Did you see the news?" Diana asked. "Yeah," Jasmine said. "I saw it. Tyler's parents are telling everyone that you're lying, that he was just joking around and you took it the wrong way. They're saying the video doesn't show what really happened." Jasmine felt a surge of anger. "The video shows exactly what happened. And it doesn't matter what story they're trying to spin. The evidence speaks for itself." I know, Diana said quietly. But Jasmine, some kids at school are really mad. They're saying you got Tyler kicked off the baseball team right before championships. They're saying you're trying to ruin his chances of getting into a good college. It's getting ugly. Jasmine had expected this. She'd known there would be backlash. But hearing about it was different than imagining it. Are they giving you trouble? She asked. A little, Diana admitted. But I told them I support you. And I'm not the only one. There's a bunch of us who are standing with you. We're tired of pretending everything is fine when it's not. After they hung up, Jasmine's mom came into the living room. She'd been on the phone with the school district's lawyer. They want to settle, she said. Settle what? Jasmine asked. They're offering to expel Tyler, Brandon, and Kyle. They'll implement new anti-bullying policies and mandatory training for all staff. And they're willing to provide a written apology and cover any counseling costs you might need. It sounded good on paper, but Jasmine heard what wasn't being said. They want me to stay quiet, don't they? No media interviews, no public statements, her mom nodded. They're worried about the school's reputation. And probably about lawsuits from other parents. What do you think I should do? Her mom sat down next to her. That's not my decision to make, baby. This is your story. You're the one who lived through this. Whatever you decide, your dad and I will support you. Jasmine thought about it for a long time. Part of her wanted to take the settlement and move on. She was tired. Tired of being at the center of all this drama. Tired of reading nasty comments online. Tired of worrying about what would happen when she went back to school. But another part of her remembered all those messages from other students. The ones who'd been suffering in silence just like she had. If she stayed quiet now, would anything really change? Or would it all just go back to the way it was once the attention died down? Her phone buzzed with a new message. It was from someone she didn't know, another Riverside student. My younger sister starts high school next year. Please don't let them sweep this under the rug. She deserves better than what we got. That made the decision for her. I want to speak at the next school board meeting. Jasmine told her mom, I want to tell them what happened publicly so it's on the record. And I want them to do more than just policies and training. I want real accountability. Her mom smiled, though her eyes were sad. You're sure? It's going to be hard. People are going to say terrible things. They already are, Jasmine pointed out. At least this way something good might come from it. The school board meeting was scheduled for the following Tuesday. That gave Jasmine 5 days to prepare her statement, and for the school district to panic about what she might say. Principal Henderson called multiple times, asking to meet with her before the board meeting. The district's lawyer called too. They wanted to know what she planned to say, wanted to coordinate messaging, wanted to make sure everyone was on the same page. Jasmine's family lawyer, David Morrison, handled them. My client will be exercising her right to address the school board during public comment. What she says is her business. If the district has concerns about her statement, perhaps they should focus on addressing the issues she'll be raising, rather than trying to control her narrative. In the days leading up to the meeting, something unexpected happened. The story went beyond Riverside High. Other students from other schools in the district started reaching out. They had their own stories of discrimination, harassment, and adults who looked the other way. A boy named Christopher from Lincoln High described being bullied for being in a wheelchair, with students making jokes about running him over or hiding his wheelchair as a prank. A girl named Aisha from Jefferson Middle School talked about being the only Muslim student in her grade and facing constant comments about terrorism and deportation. Even though she was born in America, the messages kept coming. 20 students, 30, 50, each one a piece of a bigger picture that Jasmine was only starting to understand. This wasn't just about Riverside High. This was about a systemic problem in the entire district. We need to do something with these stories, Jasmine told her parents. We can't let them disappear. Her dad nodded slowly. David thinks we should compile them and present them to the board as evidence of a district-wide issue. Show them this isn't isolated to one school or one incident. That weekend, Jasmine and her parents worked with David Morrison to organize the testimonies. Students who were willing to be identified gave their names. Others chose to remain anonymous, but their stories were still included. By Monday night, they had a 70-page document detailing incidents across 5 schools in the district. The school board meeting was held in the district's central office, a modern building with a large auditorium. Jasmine had never been to a school board meeting before. She'd imagined a small room with a handful of people. Instead, the auditorium was packed. Every seat was filled and people lined the walls. News cameras set up in the back. Reporters shuffled papers and checked their equipment. Jasmine felt her stomach flip. This was real. This was really happening. The board members sat at a long table at the front of the room. 7 people in business attire, looking uncomfortable as they surveyed the crowd. The board president, a woman named Carol Winters, called the meeting to order. There were routine items on the agenda first. Budget discussions. Approval of minutes from the last meeting. Jasmine barely heard any of it. Her heart was pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. Finally, they reached public comment. Several parents spoke first. Some supported the district's handling of the situation. Others criticized it. Tyler's mother stood up, her voice shaking with emotion, and talked about how her son was a good boy who'd made a mistake and didn't deserve to have his future destroyed. Jasmine listened to that speech, feeling a complicated mix of emotions. She didn't want to destroy anyone's future. She really didn't. But where was this concern when she was being targeted every single day? When she was afraid to walk down the hallways of her own school? Then it was her turn. David Morrison walked up to the microphone with her, a show of support. Jasmine's hands trembled as she unfolded her statement. "My name is Jasmine Carter, and I'm a freshman at Riverside High School," she began. Her voice sounded stronger than she felt. 3 months ago, I started documenting the harassment I was experiencing at school. I recorded audio of students making racist comments. I saved screenshots of messages telling me I didn't belong. I wrote down every incident every time someone made me feel unsafe or unwanted. She paused, looking around the room. Some people were nodding. Others looked skeptical. She kept going. Last Tuesday, I was threatened with a baseball bat by 3 students in a school hallway. I have video of that incident. But the bat wasn't the worst part. The worst part was knowing that I'd tried to report harassment multiple times before that, and nothing happened. The worst part was being told by teachers to ignore it, to rise above it, to not be so sensitive. Her voice grew stronger as she continued. Since I spoke up, dozens of other students have come forward with their own stories. Students who've been harassed because of their race, their religion, their disability, their sexual orientation, or just because they're different. And what I've learned is that this isn't just a Riverside High problem. It's a district problem. It's a problem that happens when adults see something wrong and choose to look away. She held up the document they'd compiled. This is 70 pages of student testimonies from 5 schools in this district. These are your students. These are the kids you're supposed to protect. And you're failing them. The room erupted. Some people applauded. Others shouted disagreements. One of Tyler's friend's parents yelled that she was lying, that she was just trying to get attention. Carol Winters banged her gavel, calling for order. "Let her finish," she said firmly. Jasmine took a breath and continued. "I'm not here to ruin anyone's life. I'm here because I want to go to school without being afraid. I want every student in this district to feel safe and welcomed. And that's not going to happen with just policies and training programs. It's going to happen when the adults in charge start taking us seriously, when we tell you something is wrong." She placed the document on the table in front of the board members. "I hope you'll read these stories. I hope you'll believe these students. And I hope you'll do better." As she walked back to her seat, the auditorium exploded with noise. Applause from some sections, angry shouts from others. Jasmine sat down between her parents, her whole body shaking. The school board meeting lasted another hour after Jasmine spoke, but she barely remembered any of it. Her ears were ringing, her hands wouldn't stop shaking, and she felt like she might throw up. Her mom kept an arm around her shoulders while her dad took notes on everything the board members said. The board promised to review the document. They promised a full investigation. They promised changes, but Jasmine had heard promises before. What she didn't expect was what happened the next morning. She woke up to her phone buzzing nonstop. Messages, tags, shares. The video of her speech at the school board meeting had gone viral. Someone had recorded it and posted it online, and now thousands of people were watching, commenting, sharing their own stories. Her mom knocked on her door. "You need to see this," she said, holding out her tablet. The local news story had been picked up by national outlets. Major news websites were running articles about student activism and systemic bullying in schools. Educational advocacy groups were reaching out, asking if Jasmine would share her story. Other school districts were contacting the Riverside district to ask about their policies. "This is bigger than we thought it would be," her dad said at breakfast, scrolling through his own phone. "A lot bigger." Jasmine felt overwhelmed. She just wanted to feel safe at her own school. She hadn't meant to start a movement or become a spokesperson. She was just a freshman who was tired of being pushed around. But ready or not, things were changing fast. By Wednesday, the school board held an emergency meeting and announced a comprehensive review of bullying policies across the entire district. They hired an outside firm to conduct climate surveys at every school. They committed to mandatory training not just for staff but for students and parents too. Tyler, Brandon, and Kyle were officially expelled. Their parents tried to fight it, threatened lawsuits, but the evidence was too solid. The video didn't lie, and neither did the dozens of other testimonies that had been submitted. The 3 teachers who'd dismissed Jasmine's complaints were placed on administrative leave pending investigation. Mrs. Patterson, Mr. Weaver, and Coach Thomas were suddenly scrambling to explain why they hadn't followed proper reporting procedures. But the biggest surprise came on Friday. Exactly 1 week after Jasmine had stood up in that hallway, Principal Henderson announced his resignation. In his statement, he said it was time for new leadership at Riverside High, someone who could guide the school through this transformation and rebuild trust with students and families. He didn't admit fault exactly, but everyone understood what he was really saying. He'd lost control of the school, and he knew it. The following Monday, Jasmine returned to Riverside High. She'd been nervous about it all weekend, imagining angry students confronting her, people blaming her for everything that had happened. Her parents had offered to transfer her to a different school, but she'd said no. She wasn't running away. The atmosphere at school was strange, quiet in a way it hadn't been before. Students moved through the hallways carefully, like everyone was hyper-aware of being watched. Teachers stood at their doorways between classes, actually paying attention to what was happening in the corridors. Some students definitely blamed Jasmine. She saw it in their faces, heard the whispered comments as she passed. Tyler had friends, people who thought he'd been treated unfairly, but others went out of their way to acknowledge her. A nod in the hallway, a quiet thank you at lunch, small gestures that meant more than they probably realized. Diana found her at her locker before first period. "Hey," she said, smiling nervously. "How are you doing?" "I'm okay," Jasmine said. "Still getting used to everyone staring at me." "They'll get over it eventually," Diana said. "But hey, I wanted to tell you something. I submitted my own formal complaint about the comments about my accent and stuff. I figured if you could be brave enough to speak up, I could too." Over the next few weeks, Jasmine learned that Diana wasn't the only one. 15 students had filed formal complaints. The school was conducting interviews, reviewing evidence, taking actual action. For the first time, students felt like their voices mattered. The interim principal was a woman named Dr. Roberts who'd been brought in from another district. She was no-nonsense and direct, and within her first week, she'd implemented new protocols. Every harassment complaint had to be documented and forwarded to administration within 24 hours. There were consequences for staff who didn't comply. Students could report incidents anonymously through an online portal, and there were regular assemblies about respect, inclusion, and standing up for each other. It wasn't perfect. Some students resented the changes, felt like they were being treated like children who needed constant supervision. Others thought the new policies didn't go far enough. But it was progress. Real, tangible progress. About a month after everything happened, a guidance counselor Jasmine had never met before asked her to come to her office. Ms. Chen was new to Riverside, hired specifically to focus on diversity and inclusion initiatives. "I wanted to talk to you about something," Ms. Chen said. "We're starting a student leadership program focused on creating a more inclusive school environment. Students from different backgrounds working together to identify problems and propose solutions. I think you'd be perfect for it." Jasmine hesitated. "I don't know. I'm not really a leader type," Ms. Chen smiled. "You stood up when it would have been easier to stay silent. You documented everything carefully and presented your case clearly. You spoke in front of a packed auditorium and a school board. Jasmine, you're exactly the leader type. You just didn't know it yet." Jasmine joined the program. So did Diana, Kevin, Christopher from Lincoln High, and about 20 other students from across the district. They met twice a week, talking about their experiences and brainstorming ways to make schools safer and more welcoming for everyone. It was hard work, sometimes frustrating, but also empowering in a way Jasmine had never experienced before. By the end of the school year, Riverside High was a different place. Not perfect, not by a long shot. There were still students who said offensive things, still kids who excluded others. But there was also accountability now. There were consequences. And there was a growing group of students who refused to stay silent when they saw something wrong. The baseball team didn't win championships that year without Tyler. Some people still held that against Jasmine, but she'd learned to live with the fact that not everyone would understand or appreciate what she'd done. She'd done it for herself and for the students who came after her. In May, Dr. Roberts called an end-of-year assembly. She talked about the challenges the school had faced and the progress they'd made. Then she did something unexpected. She asked Jasmine to come up on stage. Jasmine's heart raced as she walked up, hundreds of eyes watching her. Dr. Roberts handed her a certificate, an award for student leadership and courage. But more than that, she said something that Jasmine would never forget. This young woman could have transferred schools. She could have stayed quiet to avoid drama. Instead, she stood up, not just for herself, but for every student in this district who's ever felt unsafe or unwelcome. That takes extraordinary courage, and it's my hope that her example inspires all of you to be brave enough to speak up when you see injustice. The applause was mixed. Some students clapped enthusiastically, others barely participated, but Jasmine didn't need everyone's approval. She had something more important. She had her voice back, and she'd learned how powerful that voice could be. That summer, Jasmine was invited to speak at a national education conference about student advocacy and creating inclusive school environments. She almost said no, still uncomfortable with the attention, but she thought about all those messages she'd received. From students who'd felt alone and afraid just like she had, she said yes. Standing on that stage in front of hundreds of educators, Jasmine told her story one more time. But this time, she didn't just talk about what had happened to her. She talked about what she'd learned. I used to think that speaking up would make things worse, she said. I thought if I just kept my head down and got through it, everything would be fine. But silence doesn't protect you. It just protects the people who are hurting you. She looked out at the audience, at all those adults whose job was to keep students safe. If you take one thing from my story, let it be this. Believe students when they tell you something is wrong. Don't dismiss them. Don't tell them to rise above it or that kids are just being kids. Listen to them. Document what they tell you. And take action. Because if you don't, you're not just failing that one student. You're failing everyone who's watching to see if speaking up makes any difference at all. When she finished, the applause was thunderous. People stood. Educators came up to her afterward, sharing their own commitment to doing better, to being the adults that students needed them to be. On the flight home, Jasmine looked out the window at the clouds below. A year ago, she'd been miserable, afraid, counting down the days until she could escape. Now she was flying across the country, sharing her story, making a difference. She thought about Tyler sometimes. She'd heard he'd enrolled in a different school district, had to explain his expulsion to college admissions officers. Part of her felt bad about that. But a bigger part of her knew that consequences were important. Actions had to mean something. She thought about all the students who'd reached out to her, who'd shared their stories, who'd found the courage to speak up because she had. That's what made everything worth it. Not the awards or the news coverage or the recognition, but knowing that other kids might not have to suffer the way she had, because she'd been brave enough to say enough. When sophomore year started, Jasmine walked through the doors of Riverside High with her head held high. Some students still avoided her. Some still blamed her for the changes that had disrupted their comfortable world, but she didn't care. She'd learned that being liked by everyone was less important than standing up for what was right. And on that first day back, as she walked down the hallway where Tyler had swung that bat at her almost a year ago, she realized something important. She wasn't afraid anymore. Not of bullies, not of speaking up, not of standing alone if she had to. She'd found her voice, and nobody could ever take that away from her again. Years later, when Jasmine thought back on that day in the hallway, she realized it was the moment everything changed. Not just for her, but for everyone at Riverside High. One moment of courage, one decision to stand up instead of backing down, had created ripples that spread far beyond anything she could have imagined. She hadn't set out to be a hero or a role model. She just wanted to feel safe at school. But sometimes that's how change happens. One person decides they've had enough. One person refuses to stay silent. One person stands up even when they're shaking, even when they're scared, even when they don't know what will happen next. And that one person changes everything.